Welcome to the Side Hustle Dad, the podcast for fathers who are creating financial freedom without sacrificing their families. I'm Brian Steele, and on this show we're covering the mindset, strategies, and tactics of a profitable side hustle. Let's get to work. Welcome back to the Side Hustle Dad. I am glad you're joining me here today on the podcast. So today we're going to answer that one question I know so many of you have been thinking about. What do I charge for my service, for my product? I have no idea. I've never been a business owner. I've just gone to a job and they say, hey, you do this and we're going to pay you this. And it's take it or leave it. Maybe ask for a raise periodically, but that's it. And now you're confronted with the possibility of asking for whatever you want. But if you go too high, people are going to say no. If you go too low, you're going to feel like you were taken advantage of. So where do you start? Where do you begin when you're starting to price your services and price your product? So that's what we're going to talk about today. Really practical things. And at the end of it, you're going to have a framework to operate with, at least as a starting point. It's not where you're going to stay. And I want to caveat that. It's certainly not where I'm pricing myself at. You just are where you are right now. And then you can develop and you can go from there. Now, the first thing that I want to say is you come up with a project pricing. In as many cases as possible, I want us to move away from hourly rates. Because honestly, they don't serve us anymore. You're going to come in and you're going to provide a transformation for your client. You're going to provide a benefit for your customer, which goes beyond just the time you spent on the job. So you have to start thinking about, instead of what it costs for me to do what I do, to what worth does this have for the person that I'm serving? What worth does it bring to them? Now I know that that's just what we come to things with in our day job, and so that's the way we think about things. But we have to shift the way we operate over to project pricing. Now, I'll give an example with my recording studio. When I would work on music projects, I would see lots of studios, and there's still tons of studios that charge hourly rates. Hey, you come in for this number of hours, it's this much per hour. That is the project rate. Maybe they've got day rates where you say, hey, to record for this day, it's going to cost X. Maybe it's a little discounted because you're taking an entire day instead of a couple of hours. But it's still very time-based. What's the problem with that? Well, a musician does not know how long something should take when they come into the studio. They don't understand what is involved. What they want is a song on Spotify. They want a vinyl record. They want a mixtape. Whatever it might be, that's what they care about. And they want it to sound great in those formats. They don't come in going, I want 2 days in the recording studio. That's not what they're looking for. So that's an example that I've come across where I say, we've got to transition our thinking to projects. So with all of the music projects I work on, I say it's going to cost X per song. And it's going to be Spotify ready. That is the promise. That is the guarantee. That's what I'm working for. And they don't have to think about how long they're spending in the studio. It's a totally different way of operating. And so we have to shift our thinking to the benefit that we are providing, the transformation we are providing. There's another trap going on. Most of us start by thinking like employees. I'm going to charge $20 an hour. But there's an issue. How long it took you to do something at the beginning is not how long it takes you to do something after 4 months or 6 months. What happens? You're better. You're better at your craft. You're better at the work you do. And you accomplish that work faster, more efficiently, and with the same or better results. But if you're charging by the hour, what happened? You made less money for the same or better product. That's an efficiency penalty. You are punishing yourself for your own expertise. So we've got to stop selling our hours and start selling the results. Your client doesn't care if you took 10 hours or 10 minutes. They care that the job is done right and well so that they can move on, so that they can experience the benefit of your service. So everybody should be moving to project-based pricing, period. Obviously, with the product, you're going to charge X dollars for the product. Nobody cares how much time you put into that product necessarily. You're just going to come up with a price. So how do we come up with that initial price? Now, this is the floor. So we're going to take what I think is an initial amount of time that something should consist of, right? We're going to set a floor at $25 an hour. If you've got some special credentials or expertise or certifications, you might bump that up to $35, $40 an hour, something like that. But you're going to set that price, $25 an hour, and then you're going to tack on all materials associated with that. So if you're making a physical product, you're doing wood carvings, for example. Okay, well, if it takes you 10 hours to do a wood carving, then you take the materials, the wood that you purchased, and whatever finish material you use on it, and you take your 10 hours. You say, okay, well, I'm charging $25 an hour. It's $250 for the labor. Let's say the wood cost $50. And another $50 for that material. So you come up with $300. Makes sense? That's good. Got an initial floor. Do you go to the client and say, this is what it's going to cost? $300 for this? No. Why? Because how accurate do you think you're going to be at the beginning of this? How accurate are your estimates going to be? What is the likelihood that something comes up that you underestimated on materials, that you underestimated how long some piece or part would take, or that you might have a part of your equipment break and you got to go get it fixed and then come back? So now there's more time wasted in the work. So we need to put in some buffer to that. So you say, okay, if something takes $300, that's my initial rate. I recommend 20 to 30% on top of that. Gives you some profit margin beyond so you can grow as a business, but also gives you a little bit of a buffer if things go sideways. So in this case, $300 was our initial estimate. 20% of that, another $60, $360. Boom, there's the pricing which you can present to the client. And you're still delivering on the result. You're not just barely scraping by. You've got some margin, you've got some buffer, and you can go forward with this. Now make sure in those materials you include everything that might come in the cost of providing your service or product. So if you have to rent equipment, if you have to rent a vehicle, whatever it might be, make sure that's included in setting the price of your work. Now, before you start with that, make sure this math is staying private, right? This is for you. You're still providing the benefit. You tell the client, look, here's the finished product. You don't have to tell them how many hours you put into it, or you don't have to tell them what cost per hour it is or what the materials were. Like, you don't have to itemize any of that. You're saying, for me to do this, it's going to cost this. And you do not want to chase the sale. At this point, it's take it or leave it. If they say, nah, I think I'll pass, you say, awesome, great. If you change your mind, let me know. Do not drop the price. You are only discounting your work. We'll talk about setting prices later, raising prices, making sure we're in the right spot in our market later, but never, ever, ever feel desperate to try and land. So what about if I drop it to this? Would you do it then? Like, do not get into negotiation. We do not want to be in that space because you will always be in a race to the bottom, competing with people who are discounting their work, and you don't want to be the cheapest one out there because it's going to attract clients and customers who are looking for just the cheapest thing. And those are not the people that you want to work with. You want to work with people who value what you provide. So do not discount your work. Now, before you send that quote out, I want you to do a little dad math. Just give yourself some perspective. We've been looking for those pockets of time in our weeks to work on these things. But look at what it might cost you to do a project. If you're going to make a pitch, say it's going to take you 5 hours and you're going to charge $25 an hour, is $125 worth it for that? Maybe not. So make sure you're thinking about that in the setting of your prices. Depending on the projects you're doing, you want to make sure that if it's going to pull you away from your family at all, it's going to be worth it. Now, I know we're building, and so maybe initially you go, yeah, I can do that to get the first couple of customers under my belt. So this is really an absolute floor, and we're going to grow from here. But look at that. Evaluate that. If you go, it's not worth it to me to take on this project because of what it's going to cost me in time away from family, then don't quote that or raise the price to the point where you feel like it's worth it. Consider those costs when you're making those, and don't feel like you have to take on any project. If one just doesn't feel like a project you want to do, just move on. We talked about the benefit of having the day job is that we're not desperate. We get to build the business that we want and that we want to work in. So do not resist the urge to just try to close a sale. Hopefully that's helped. Make sure you're evaluating that. Now, let's talk a little bit about physical goods versus the services. So obviously, it's pretty easy when you're doing a service. You can estimate the cost, the materials, whatever to get the result for your clients, whatever that might be. But with physical goods, there's a lot of hidden costs that you also need to put into it. So if you are making a product, you can estimate how long it takes you to make X number of products, because I'm guessing you're going to batch, which I would recommend everybody does, which is you make a bunch of them at one time. You set aside a time and follow a process, and so you just get into a flow state. So you come up with that time that it takes to make those products, what the materials were to generate those products. Okay, that's getting you somewhere in there. You do your markup, 20, 30%, maybe more if it's more valuable than that. But make sure you also include the hidden time. So making the online listings for the products, managing the inventory, packing the product, driving to the post office to ship it. So look at those other factors in those physical goods. Make sure you're accounting for those in the pricing of a physical product. But on the product side, not everything is physical. What do you do when something has zero lumber or shipping costs? When you've done an ebook or an online course? Well, now you're in the tricky position of going, well, I guess it's just like $5. Like, let me just because I guess it doesn't matter. I just get as many people as I can to buy it. So let's do a low price. You might think that's appropriate, but I would argue that's not the approach. You're not charging for the physical product. You're actually charging for the benefit, the transformation that somebody is experiencing, because now they don't have to pay the time cost to develop the expertise which you're giving them the shortcut for. So whether it's an online course or an ebook, think through not the time you spent, but how much time you're saving somebody else. You're saving them all that trial and error. You're saving them the hours online trying to watch YouTube videos. You're shortcutting everything so there's a clear process and they can get to the result they want faster because of your expertise. Because of your expertise, they are getting there quicker. It's saving them 10 hours of frustration, and that's worth a lot more than a cup of coffee. So make sure you're valuing that piece. Okay? They're not thinking in terms of $5. They're thinking in terms of how do I get the impact, the result faster, so you can save them that time with your digital product and price it based on that. Now, you may not be able to charge, tens of thousands of dollars for an online course. Maybe you can if you can promise that sort of a benefit, but it might be worth $200, $500 for an online course. That ebook might be worth $50, $75. because you can think about it a little bit at scale, but it's going to save you a lot of time. So that's what I would recommend for you if you're looking at, say, a digital product that you're putting together to sell. Think about the time savings for someone else. So charging a fair price is what's going to make this sustainable. You're not trying to take advantage of anybody here. You're trying to develop the transformation and make a fair profit for your work, for your family, for this. So the step I've got for you now is, if you're new to this, look at your floor. If you've tried pricing and you're struggling with it, try a calculation like this. What does it come up with? What is the absolute minimum you would come up with and go, is that worth it? Does that make sense? Do I need to adjust it a little bit? Because I'm going to say it might be a little different for you. It might be slightly different pricing. You might decide it needs to be something else before this is a business you're willing to sacrifice that time for. So calculate that floor, figure that out. Next time, we're actually going to talk about moving that price up and how to know when it's the right time. So look forward to that conversation with you, and I will see you then.
Thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed the show, there's 3 ways you can help us out. First, subscribe on whatever podcast app you're using. That makes sure you never miss another episode. Second, leave us a review so that other people know this is a show worth listening to. And finally, if you've already done those, tell a friend. So many people find their favorite podcast because somebody told them about it. Thanks again, and remember, build the side hustle, but be the dad.
This show is part of the ICT Podcast Network. For more information, visit ictpod.net.